For 10 years, one billionaire walked past the same dock laborer every single night, never realizing that the poor man carrying bags of salt was the brother he framed, stole from, and sent to prison 14 years earlier. The day they met again, the billionaire lost 5 billion naira. If you think the most dangerous enemy in your life is the person who comes to your house with a cutlass or a loud voice, you are absolutely wrong. The most dangerous enemy is the one who accepts your betrayal with a smile, washes your feet, and waits 24 years to hand you a glass of water. This is the story of the Bassi family. In 2002, the patriarch of the family, Elder Ayu Bassi, died. He left behind a multi-million naira shipping logistics empire at the Calabar port, 3 historic properties, and 2 sons, Victor and Bassi. Victor was the firstborn. He was a man with a mind like a snake, tall and incapable of looking backward. Bassi, the younger brother, was a gentle academic, a young man who loved maritime law and had a heart built on absolute trust. When their father died, Victor decided that sharing the inheritance with his younger brother was a structural flaw in his plan to become the ultimate king of cross-river commerce. Victor did not just steal the inheritance. He engineered a masterpiece of psychological destruction. He conspired with a corrupt high court registry clerk in Calabar to forge an entirely new will. But he knew that if he just kicked Bassi out, the community would talk. So Victor framed his younger brother for the ultimate taboo. He planted a stash of high-grade illicit narcotics inside Bassi's car trunk, tipped off a compromised unit of the anti-drug agency, and had his own brother arrested on the morning of their father's memorial service. To the public, Victor acted devastated. He wept on local television, saying, "My younger brother has brought eternal shame to our father's name. I cannot support a criminal." Bassi was rejected by his community, stripped of his reputation, and sentenced to 14 years inside the maximum security prison. Victor took everything. He expanded the shipping company, bought old estates, married into political royalty, and became a prominent chief whose name was whispered with fear and reverence across the state. But 14 years inside a concrete cell changes a man's DNA. Bassi did not break. He spent those 14 years studying the precise maritime tax codes, port allocation loopholes, and asset structures of his brother's empire. He became an invisible master of the law. When Bassi was released in 2016, he did not seek out Victor. He did not go to the media. He changed his name, moved into a tiny, damp room near the market, and went to work for his brother's company as an anonymous night shift dock laborer, offloading heavy salt sacks from the ships into the freezing warehouses. For 10 whole years, Chief Victor Bassi walked past his younger brother on the docks in the dark, looking right through him, seeing only a ragged laborer covered in white salt dust. Victor had forgotten his brother's original face. But the salt does not forget. By 2026, Chief Victor Bassi was ready to finalize the transaction of his life. He was selling 51% of the Bassi maritime logistics empire to an international European shipping cartel for a staggering 10 billion naira. This transaction would make him untouchable, cementing his bloodline's position in high society. The final execution of the merger was scheduled to take place at the Grand Historic Senate Chamber Hall in Calabar, a building surrounded by ancient stone walls. Victor had invited the governor, the port authority directors, and the elite class of the South region. Victor stood at the podium, dressed in a magnificent, gold-embroidered traditional Calabar attire, complete with a long staff of office. Today, Victor announced, his voice booming through the microphone, we secure the future of our state's commerce. This empire was built on my personal sweat, my vision, and my unblemished legacy. We signed these papers to move forward. The European cartel representatives laid the massive, legally binding international acquisition deeds on the table. The lead corporate attorney stood up. Chief Victor, the attorney said, before we finalize the wire transfer, our offshore compliance team requires the validation of the root certificate of original Portlas. This is the document issued in 1984 to your late father, Elder Ayobasi. Our legal framework states that without the original physical signature of the true corporate successor on this specific root certificate, this entire merger is null and void under international maritime law. Victor smiled arrogantly. He pulled out an old yellowed leather folder from his briefcase. I have it right here. Signed by my late father, with my name listed as the sole corporate successor. Look at it. The attorney took the document, placed it under a high-resolution scanning device, connected to the main projector screen on the wall, and pressed enter. The projector screen did not display the old 1984 certificate. Instead, the screen flashed black, and a massive digital audit sequence began to run live in front of the governor and the entire elite audience. The audit displayed a direct, forensic tracking of every bank account, every offshore shell company, and every asset Chief Victor owned. And at the bottom of the screen, a red flashing text appeared. AS Exit Acquisition Lock. Primary route controller active. The double doors of the Senate chamber opened. Walking into the hall was not a group of lawyers or police officers. It was an elderly, blind man. The retired High Court Registry clerk from 2002, whom Victor had bribed to forge the fake will. He was being guided by a tall, elegant man, carrying a pristine leather briefcase. It was Bassi. He was no longer wearing the salt-stained clothes of a dock laborer. He was dressed in a sharp, dark, midnight blue legal gown. Victor's staff of office slipped from his hand, clattering against the marble floor. His face turned the color of stale ash. You died in prison. Who let this felon into this chamber? The lead European attorney did not look surprised. He stood up, bowed his head to Bassi, and stepped away from the table. Chief Victor, Bassi said, his voice low, steady, and with a terrifying calmness that silenced the entire hall. You thought you built an empire on a forged will and a prison sentence. You forgot that our father did not study commerce. He studied the tide of the river. Bassi called the blind clerk to the podium. The old man spoke into the microphone, his voice trembling. In 2002, Chief Victor paid me 5 million naira to replace his father's true will with a forgery. But because I feared God, I did not destroy the original document. I handed the true root deed of assignment to the younger son, Bassi, before he was taken to prison. The document Victor has held for 24 years is a dummy file, designed to trigger a total structural foreclosure if it was ever uploaded to an international maritime registry. Bassi pulled the true original 1984 certificate from his briefcase and laid it on the table. Victor, Bassi said, looking directly into his brother's terrified eyes. For 10 years, I stood on your docks. I carried your salt sack. Every time you walked past me, I didn't look at your face. I looked at your transaction ledgers. I used my access as a night laborer to document every single illegal container, every tax evasion scheme, and every falsified port manifest you executed over the last decade. Bassi pointed to the projector screen. The screen shifted to a live stream video feed from the port. 10 heavy-duty trucks from the EFCC and the Nigerian Port Authority were currently sealing off Victor's warehouses, seizing his ships, and freezing every single asset connected to his name. The European cartel is not buying your company, Victor, Bassi whispered, his voice echoing in the silent room. They bought my international holding firm 6 months ago. We allowed you to bring this merger to the public stage so that your admission of sole ownership would be captured live, preventing from hiding behind corporate shielding. The lead attorney confirmed. The payment has been wired, but it has been wired to the asset recovery account of Mr. Bassi Eyo Bassi as compensation for 14 years of unlawful corporate exclusion and state frame-up damages. Victor let out a wild, animalistic shriek. He grabbed the signing pen and tried to lunge across the table to stab his brother. But 4 armed federal marshals slammed him onto the mahogany table, pinning his gold-embroidered robes into the spilled ink. His wives and political allies scrambled out of their seats, rushing toward the exits to distance themselves from his ruin. As they dragged Chief Victor Bassi out of the Senate chamber in chains, his titles stripped, his wealth completely liquidated, his name ruined forever on live television, Bassi stayed seated at the head of the table. He picked up his father's original pen, signed the document, and looked out the window at the river. My viewers, drop your comments below. If you were Bassi, would you have allowed your brother a small house to live out his days? Or would you leave him to rot inside the same prison cell where you spent 14 years? Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications so you don't miss the next story.